Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. What if I told you the greatest empire in history didn't actually fall because of swords, but because of coins? When we look back at the mighty Roman Empire, it's so easy to focus on the drama, right? The assassinations, the epic battles, the marble palaces, but beneath all that surface-level noise, a quiet, invisible cancer was eating away at the very foundation of the state. We're going to explore exactly why Rome collapsed, and spoiler alert, it wasn't just a military failure. It was a spectacular, catastrophic failure of money.
We typically picture barbarian armies breaking through the gates, smashing statues, burning everything in sight, the whole shebang. And sure, the invaders at the gate delivered the final blow, but empires rarely just die from the outside alone. The truth is, the barbarians were essentially just walking through doors that financial ruin had already unlocked. By the time the Germanic tribes and the Goths were tearing through the empire, Rome was already a hollow shell. It had been rotting quietly from within for centuries.
It's so easy to blame the external threat, the invaders everyone always talks about. But the true internal killer here was the collapse of their currency. You see, the invaders were just the final symptom of a disease that started in the Roman treasury. Rome didn't just fall because of political corruption or outside attacks. It unraveled because the actual money they used every single day simply stopped working.
Moving to Section 1, the cost of empire. Running an empire of this size wasn't just logistically difficult, it was unbelievably expensive. The so-called Roman peace came with a colossal price tag. The empire had just grown so massive that tax revenues simply couldn't keep up with the soaring costs. You had to pay hundreds of thousands of soldiers just to defend the borders against tribes in the north and the Parthians in the east. You had to maintain roads, aqueducts, and baths. And crucially, and this is kind of mind-blowing, you had to constantly bribe your own troops with massive bonuses just to stop them from assassinating you. The Roman state was burning through cash way faster than it could collect it.
So stuck between rioting citizens on one side and mutinous soldiers on the other, emperors turned to an ancient, invisible tax. Because think about it, if you raise taxes too high, the people revolt. If you don't pay the military, well, the soldiers revolt. To survive this impossible situation, rulers found a sneaky way to pay their bills without immediately angering anyone. And the best part for them, it didn't require a single new law to be passed. Which brings us to Section 2, debasing the denarius. This is where we see the mechanical failure of the money itself, starting with the famous silver denarius.
For centuries, this coin was the bedrock of the global economy. It was trust turned into metal. But when the treasuries started running dry, the government started tinkering with the recipe, using a trick called debasement. The imperial mints would melt down pure silver coins, mix in cheap base metals like copper or bronze, and then, here's the kicker, stamp the exact same face value on them. Suddenly, you could turn 1 million silver coins into 1.5 million debased coins. It looked like free money.
And watch what happens over just a few generations. Back under Emperor Augustus, the coin was about 95% pure silver. Fast forward to 215 AD under Caracalla, it's down to 50%. And by 268 AD, it was completely hollowed out, containing less than 5% silver. Literally less than 5%. You can essentially watch the money turn from pure wealth into a worthless bronze slug with a shiny, deceptive coating.
But, the public isn't stupid. People noticed their money was losing its intrinsic value. Merchants started demanding more of these watered-down coins for the exact same goods, and the consequence? Undeniable hyperinflation. It pushed the price of a single pound of gold to a staggering 20 million denarii by the year 337 AD. A measure of wheat that used to cost 1 denarii suddenly cost dozens. The savings of the Roman middle class essentially just evaporated into thin air.
Now we hit Section 3. Price controls and chaos. As the economy spiraled out of control, desperate emperors tried to forcefully fix the monster they had just created.
Enter Emperor Diocletian. In what is basically a 2,000-year-old tradition, he decided to deflect the blame onto greedy merchants instead of looking at his own money printing. Terrified he was losing control of his army due to inflation, Diocletian blamed avarice, or greed, for the rising costs, completely ignoring the fact that his own government had just pumped millions of worthless, debased coins into the economy.
So Diocletian tried to forcefully fix this by issuing an edict on maximum prices in 301 AD. He legally fixed the cost of thousands of items, and the penalty for overcharging was literally death. But you really can't legislate the laws of supply and demand, right? So what actually happened? Goods just disappeared from the shelves. Merchants simply stopped selling. A massive black market emerged, and the official Roman trade network practically collapsed overnight.
The result was a classic two-tier society. Later emperors, like Constantine, realized the silver currency was completely dead, so they introduced a new, pure gold coin called the solidus. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. Taxes were demanded in this new gold, and government officials were paid in gold. But the everyday peasant? They were stuck using the endlessly inflating bronze and copper junk. The state protected itself and sacrificed the people, completely tearing the social fabric apart.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, Echoes of Rome Today. Because we really have to ask, did we learn anything from Rome, or are modern economies running the exact same playbook?
The scary part of this explainer isn't just what happened 2 millennia ago. It's seeing Rome's disaster perfectly replicated in the 20th and 21st centuries when modern states tried to print their way out of debt. Think about Weimar Germany in 1923, destroying their currency so badly people used wheelbarrows of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. Or Zimbabwe in the 2000s, using the exact same playbook to cover massive government debt. To put that into perspective, Zimbabwe hit an annual inflation rate of 89.7 sexillion%. Sexillion. That is what happens when you bend economic reality until it entirely breaks. Prices were doubling and tripling multiple times a day until the currency completely died, and citizens were forced to use foreign money just to survive.
But you know, we don't even have to look at those extreme cases to see the Roman playbook in action today. Just look at the US dollar since 1971. That was the year the dollar's direct link to gold was completely severed. Just like Rome stepping away from the pure silver denarius, modern advanced economies stepped away from a physical anchor, moving to a pure fiat system. And since then, global money supplies have expanded massively and debt has absolutely skyrocketed.
We might not have wheelbarrows of cash in the streets, thankfully, but the quiet, subtle erosion of our purchasing power is the exact same Roman inflation tax at work. What a single dollar could buy in 1971 now costs well over $6 today. The paper looks the same, the digital numbers in your bank account look the same, but the intrinsic value inside of it has been slowly hollowed out to pay for expanding debts.
As history proves over and over, when trust in a fiat currency finally snaps, the only things that survive the collapse are real, tangible assets that actually produce value. Whether it was the Roman elites hoarding golden land or modern investors fleeing into hard assets, the lesson is crystal clear. When the money fails, paper promises burn, but things with intrinsic demand endure.
Rome didn't fall because their walls were weak. They fell because their money died and they simply couldn't afford to defend those walls anymore. They didn't think their money could die, just as we blindly trust the numbers on our screens today. But inflation isn't an accident, it's a tool, and history shows it's a tool with devastating consequences. So, when our money stops being trusted, what will fall next? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning what you trust and keep learning from the past.